Hi, welcome to the H&H Debriefing. I'm Megan, and I'm with Jen. And we're going to talk, let's see, well, first of all, it's January 23rd. This is our 25th debriefing, and we're glad you could join us. And what we want to talk today is about the Big Misunderstanding, which, if you're a romance reader, you know very well what it is, and likely you've gotten frustrated, but also intrigued by it. The biggest misunderstanding is something that one character believes about the other that carries through the course of the book that prevents them from admitting that they are in love with each other or admitting to themselves that they care about the other person or whatever. And it can be something like, oh, I overheard him talking and I thought he was talking about me, but really he was talking about someone else, or geez, I can't think of any other great examples. But Big Misunderstanding is very frequently used because it keeps the couple apart for a while, but it can also, sometimes, the big misunderstanding could have been cleared up with a simple conversation. So we're talking about that and whether or not we are okay with the big miss or we hate it. What do you think, Jen?
For me, I hate it. I often find myself like mentally and sometimes actually screaming at a book or a character because I'm like, if you had just said one thing, if you just spoken up in that one moment, like, see that moment right there? That's the moment that you should have said something. And so it's just super frustrating to me. And Heather, who isn't here in on this today, she and I were talking earlier about Tessa Dare's Say Yes to the Marquess, which we've all been kind of talking a lot about recently. We all really like it. But in that book, there are no big misunderstandings. There are misunderstandings. There is lots of angst and, you know, places where things would have been simpler if someone had just said, you know, oh, hey, I'm actually in love with you. But for the most part, Tessa Dare really handled their life and their communication very well together. It's actually kind of always funny to me that, you know, one of the major, you know, pieces of advice for relationships is, you know, to communicate and be honest with one another. And in romance, we see these big misunderstandings so often. But so I always really appreciate it when I'm like, yes, someone was actually open about how they felt in this moment, and it worked out. Imagine that.
Well, for me, I think they happen a lot in historicals in particular, which is interesting because, and for me, I don't hate them as vehemently as perhaps you do, because the only times I don't like them is when, well, and that's probably most of the time I probably don't like them because the character, as I've come to know the character, would have spoken at that moment. If it's consistent with the character not to have spoken or not to have cleared something up, I'm totally okay with the big misunderstanding because I just want character consistency. If we have, you know, Mr. Darcy, who's unable to, in the Matthew McFadden version, for example, who's finds it really difficult to speak his feelings and his emotions like that. If that were played out in a different scenario, that would make sense to me. Somebody that's always been really volatile and whatever, who just decides to clamp his mouth shut for that one moment, I totally don't like. So that's my take.
No, yeah, that's very fair, and I think that is kind of. I think I get most frustrated when, and I see this with heroines a lot, when an author is trying to write a heroine is very strong. And again, I think most of my issues comes with historical romances, where the heroine is like, I'm bold, I'm independent, and she first just comes off as kind of angry at the world, and then uses that anger to be like, well, if he had only just said this, then I'm going to hold this grudge. But it is interesting that we do find these big misunderstandings a lot in historical. I don't quite know why that is. I don't know if it was just a more passive time, and so people don't bring up things as often, or...
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You know, you just reminded me, and then I'll shoot it back to you to say bye and everything, but one family relative, a real person, was quoted. My husband and I were talking about communication, and one of our relatives said about the other one, well, if he doesn't know what's wrong, I'm certainly not going to tell him. And that's kind of it right there. And I thought that was, you know, they had many big misunderstandings, this couple. So anyway, so
Oh
back
gosh.
to you, Jen.
So they needed a romance novelist to get in there
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
solve their issues for them.
Yeah.
But all right, well, that's it for this week, guys. We'll be back next week with Heather, hopefully, in the office as well for our 26th episode. And yeah, so that'll be it. Let us know in the comments how you feel about The Big Misunderstanding. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you think it serves a purpose and so you don't care how it's used? But let us know, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.